Howdy, and welcome to episode 45 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen, and today is Thursday, December 28th, 2017. So I hope you had a very Merry Christmas. Wally also says hello. Maybe I should officially make him my co-host. Anyway, I hope you had a very Merry Christmas and or whatever holiday you may celebrate at this time of year. And I hope you will have a Happy New Year. So there are quite a few things that I want to talk about today, so I am just going to cut the introduction short and jump right into the episode. This shirt is a gift that I got from my friend Elissa. Basically, let me show it to you, and then I will talk about the gift. So she is in my knitting group. So it says famous authors, and it is a list of pictures of various authors that are basically into cats. And so up here we have J.K. Meowling, Charles Kittens, Edgar Allan Poe, let's see the next list, R.L. Feline, William Shakespeare, Leo Tolstoy, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, George R.R. Meowton, and Jane Austen. So she said that she saw this shirt and thought it would be perfect for me, and it is. Thank you very much. And one of the things that I really like about this shirt, besides being about books and cats, is that it actually has a nice combination of modern day authors and classical authors. So it's fun having J.K. Meowling and Jane Austen on the same shirt. So it's a shirt that just really makes me happy. So thank you very much, and I wanted to share that, especially since it was a Christmas gift, and it just makes me happy. So thank you. For this episode's shawl, I have my just completed Cheshire Cat shawl to show you guys. So it is completed and even blocked. So this is a striped shawl in the body, and then there is a really pretty lace border right there. So this was a pretty easy overall to knit. The body is garter stitch, so I actually got a lot of reading done while I was working on this, which is always nice to be able to combine knitting and reading. And then the lace border, so I'll let you get a good look at that one. That was really fun. Had a lot of yarn overs and decreases and some other little things in there. And when it blocks out, it makes these nice little points. So it was also really easy to block and to lay out. And Wally is in here, you can't see him, but he is just dive bombing my lap. So hopefully he won't shake the camera again this time. Anyway, so the yarn that I used is my Camelot base, which is a fingering weight merino cashmere nylon. So this is really super soft with that little bit of cashmere especially. And the two colors I used, the gray is Night, so it's a charcoal gray, and the pink is called My Beauty Will Not Hold. And I picked these colors. I really love the way they look together, but I picked these colors because these two skeins were in my damaged skeins box, which basically is whenever I am working with yarn, if I come across a flaw in a skein, or if I damage a skein, if I snap it while I'm rescanning it or something like that, it's not a skein that I can sell, so I put it in the damaged skeins box, and I eventually will do something with those. So this is what I did with these two damaged skeins. So this probably would not have been the color combination that I would have picked if I just had all of my colors. But I'm glad that these skeins were damaged, because I really like the way this turned out. So I'm happy that I had that narrow palette to choose from, because I think the end result is something I'm really happy with. So the pattern is a Cheshire Cat shawl. So since it is a literary themed shawl, it is my entry for the Q4 knit along for the podcast. So the Cheshire Cat shawl, and the designer is Anna Dalvi, D-A-L-V-I. Hang on just a second, there's a little notification on my screen. Okay. Anna Dalvi, D-A-L-V-I. and she has some pretty shawls, so definitely check her out. So fun knit there, and put it on so it's not backwards, and something that I'm happy to have finished and just came off the blocking board this morning. The part of the reason for that is I wanted to finish it in time to talk to you guys about it, but also and to get it for the knit along for the podcast, but also because this is a designer participating in the Indie Design Gift Along, which I've mentioned a couple of times on the podcast. So that is something that is going on right now. It's in the last week of the Gift Along because it ends at the December 31st. And I have not yet posted the FO because I literally just took this off the blocking board right before I started recording this episode. So when I'm done recording, I will go take some pictures and update my project page on Ravelry and then go post in the Gift Along threads. And so about the Gift Along, this year there are 311, I think that's the right number, designers participating. And one of the goals of the Gift Along is to help people find designers that they might not already be familiar with. And there's lots of other things that go with it. But one of the things that the person who puts together all the stats for the Gift Along, in the last week, so now that we're in the last week of the Gift Along, she puts together a list called Designer Representation. And basically it is just looking at the FO thread. So not all the individual threads, just looking at the FO thread, the finished objects. How many times has a pattern by a certain designer been finished, been posted in the FOs? And so she has a list. I think that the top number, let me scroll down, 51 plus FOs. There are currently 4 designers who have 51 plus finished objects. And then, it groups, so 31 to 50, 21 to 30, 11 to 20, 8 to 10, and then it kind of breaks down into smaller numbers. But then there is a list called Unrepresented. And this is a list of designers that are participating in the Gift Along who do not have anybody posting an FO of their designs in the FO thread. This does not mean that nobody has started knitting or crocheting any of these person's designs. A lot of times people think that they're going to get a lot more done in the Gift Along, and so they start a bunch of projects and they don't finish, which is totally fine. And sometimes people, the Gift Along is still going on, so sometimes people are working on things and they just haven't finished yet. And that is actually the case with this designer, Anna Dalby. I noticed that her name is on the list of unrepresented designers. So it's not that she's completely unrepresented, she just hasn't been represented yet. So as soon as I post this, the picture of this shawl in the FO thread, then she will be able to be moved from the unrepresented list to the at least one design represented. So I'm really glad now that I decided to make this shawl because I'm sure, looking at the list and finding your name on that is a bit disappointing. And maybe there are other people who are making her designs, and maybe some other people will also post FOs by the end of the Gift Along. But I feel like I'm definitely helping that designer get off the unrepresented list. And even though I wanted to show this shawl to you guys and I wanted to have it officially done and blocked for our knit along, it was seeing the designer's name on this list that really pushed me. Okay, I can't wait on blocking this. I need to block it and finish it so I can post it and give that designer at least one FO. So that makes me really happy, just on top of everything else with the shawl. Love how it turned out. It was a really fun knit, and I get to help out the designer. So kind of a lot of wins just in this one project. So that unrepresented designer list, there's somebody else's name on it that I recognized. My own. So basically that means that nobody in the Gift Along has posted a finished object from one of my designs. I know of at least 2 people that have been working on my designs, One of them I know is not going to finish her project by the end of the gift along. It's totally okay. I'm fine with that. And I'm actually not sure about the other. I'll have to go check on that. But so I'm unrepresented. And part of me, and looking at the list, I mean, it's not like it's just me and the designer of this shawl. I mean, I counted, there are 55 names on this list, and it was updated not too long ago. It says this morning at 10:50 a.m. Eastern time. So right now it's 10:18 a.m. Central time, so 11:18. So it was updated half an hour ago from when I'm recording this. So there are 55 unrepresented designers. So out of the 311, 55 are unrepresented. So that's a pretty big chunk. And I totally understand. I mean, the 311 designers, it's a lot of designers and patterns to go through. Because it's not just, one pattern per designer. I mean, each designer can have multiple patterns. So that's probably definitely thousands of patterns, maybe even up to the 10,000. So that's a lot of patterns to go through, and not everything is going to be represented. But so seeing my name on that list, it's like, oh, there was definitely disappointment, kind of, gosh, couldn't even get on the at least one finished. Again, the gift along is not finished, is not over. There are still a few more days, and maybe someone will post something. So yes, there's a little bit of disappointed, but also I kind of had this moment of, I'm not surprised. It really does not surprise me that I am on that unrepresented list. And in that sense, I'm not disappointed. It's kind of a confirmation of some of the things that I've been thinking about, and I've even talked about on the podcast. And that's so why am I not surprised that I'm on the unrepresented list? Because I haven't really done the work. I haven't done anything to help out my designs. I haven't been putting very many new designs out. Yes, there was the book, but those are only available still as the book, not available individually. Although my graphic designer currently, I just sent the individual versions of the patterns from Parliament of Cals to her to lay out in my individual template. So those cals will be released individually as soon as I get them back, the designs back from her. Anyway, so I had the book, but they're not individual patterns. I haven't really done very much advertising for the patterns. I haven't spent very much time participating in the discussion of the gift along. I thought that I would, but I've got a lot going on, and unfortunately not everything that I want to do gets done, and that was something that didn't get done. So I am not surprised because I haven't really done anything to help out. I basically just kind of joined the gift along and said, I hope people find me. And obviously people have not, and that's fine because I do think that some work does need to be put into it. If you can't just expect to be put on a list and then just have people find you. So I am okay with that. But I am okay with it in the sense of, I'm okay with not having done the work even. And it really cemented the point that I've been thinking about and talking to you guys, that right now designing is not where my heart is. It is not the thing that gets me excited and enthusiastic about things. So I have the green beaded shawl, which is ready for test knitting. I will post the test knit on Monday of next week. So I guess that's actually January 1st, so New Year's Day. So that way I can mention it in the newsletter that goes out on that Tuesday, January 2nd. So I have that test knit, so I will have that pattern, but that's pretty much it. That is all that is in my pattern designing queue. And again, I am okay with that. Right now, that's just not where my enthusiasm is. And I think it was seeing my name on that unrepresented list that really cemented that for me and really let me have that last little bit of acceptance. And this is not to say this is forever. Just because I make this decision now doesn't mean it's set in stone. I can, a year from now, heck, a month from now, if I get inspired, if I get enthusiastic, then that can change. It's totally okay. But right now, this is where I am, and that's okay. So I've been thinking about, okay, so what am I enthusiastic about? Obviously Roundtable Yarns, but really what I've been thinking about is people have asked me, like, do you have another book idea? Yes, I do. I've actually had the third book idea. I kind of got it kind of in the middle of working on the second book. Just as a little unspoiler alert, I am not going to tell you the idea yet. So I know what the third book would be about. And I am excited about the theme. I am excited to write the introduction. I am excited to write the description of each of the names and explaining kind of the characteristics and everything behind the names and the stories that I'm telling. That's what I'm enthusiastic about. I'm enthusiastic about doing a photo shoot and seeing the layout again. I realized that I skipped the kind of the chunk of the book that's important, the designing the patterns. I will say that it is a book of shawls in my head. That's what I'm seeing. Designing the shawls, that is not the thing I'm enthusiastic about. I'm enthusiastic about everything else about the book. And so it started me thinking, well, maybe this book is one that I am more of the curator, the editor, that I actually put out a call for designs and get other designers to show me what they're, based on the inspiration that I give them, what they can come up with. And I get to do the whole, choosing from among the designs to see which ones work best together and which ones best, fit with the vision, and putting that together. That, to me, at the moment, sounds exciting. That is something that I could get really enthusiastic about. And I think that's something that I would like to work toward. I'm not ready to do it yet. Part of it is a time thing, but also part of it is a financial thing. I want to make sure the designers get paid fairly, so I need to make sure that I have the money to invest, not just in the production of the book itself, but also, since I wouldn't be doing the designs, I would need to have additional funds to pay the designers. So that's something I'm going to have to kind of budget in, and so thinking about and planning for that. So don't rush out and get super excited about that yet if you are excited about it, because it will be something that takes a while to come together. But that idea excites me. So I think that by allowing myself to step back and not be an active designer myself right now, I can do other things, save that time and effort and inspiration for the things that I am enthusiastic about. So I guess the being on that unrepresented list has actually been helpful in helping me just take that final step in making that acceptance of where I am right now. Again, like I said, it could change, but right now, this is where I am, and I am happy about that. I'm recording this segment a little early because I have some finished items that are gifts, and so I need to wrap them, and I wanted to make sure I could show you guys and talk about them before they got wrapped and given as gifts. So 2 things. The first is a pair of boot cuffs. So the previous episode, if you watched it, I showed you some boot cuffs that I'd started that had a really tight gauge and cables, and it just was not working for me. Hurt my hands, and I knew I wouldn't be able to finish them. So I ripped out the yarn and decided to do these super, super simple boot cuffs. Super simple, a 2x2 rib. I mean, that's how simple. I technically used a pattern just to get the numbers for how many to cast on. And yeah, I think actually the pattern name is Super Simple Boot Cuffs or something like that. I will link to it in the show notes. Anyway, so like I said, 2x2 rib, really, really easy. It took me less than 24 hours to do the pair. So the thing that I do want to mention is, or talk about, is the bind off. So my cast on, I'm very happy with the cast on, which is just long tail cast on, nice and stretchy, and it looks neat. It gives a neat edge. The bind off, this one actually is okay, but usually I have problems with the bind off being too tight. So I most often now use Lucy's modified conventional bind off. So it's very similar to the knit one, or actually knit two, and then pass the stitch on your right hand needle over the other stitch, and then knit another one and pass. That's the conventional bind off. So Lucy's modified conventional bind off does exactly what it says. It modifies that. And on my other YouTube channel, the one where I do tutorials, I actually have a tutorial video for that. So usually that's my go-to bind off. But I've noticed when you do that bind off on ribbing, it doesn't always look really great. So I decided that I didn't want to do that on this boot cuff. And Wally is definitely trying to get my attention. So I'm putting him in my lap. He'll say hi. Here you go. Anyway, so I decided, I just did a Google search for best bind off for ribbing. And I saw lots of different things, but I kept seeing the sewn bind off, especially Elizabeth Zimmerman's, so the easy sewn bind off. And so I started looking at instructions for that, and that does seem to be a bind off that a lot of people use for the top of socks if they're doing toe up socks. But there doesn't seem to be a consensus sorry, Wally just jiggled the tripod a lot. Apologize. There doesn't seem to be a consensus for exactly how to do that. There are lots of different ways that I saw people doing a sewn bind off. So I picked one and I did it. So that is what I have. And it does flare out a little bit, especially if you compare the bottom. And I'm sorry, I did not set up my lights that I've gotten for this little segment. So it's a little darker, probably a lot darker than the rest of this episode. So yes, it doesn't look quite as neat as the cast on, but it doesn't look quite as, it does flare out a little bit, but it doesn't look quite as flared out or quite as kind of wiggly wobbly, which is what I usually get with a ribbed bind off. So I'm happy overall with it. I'm sure if I had more time and more experimentation, I could probably figure out something maybe better. Oh my gosh. Wally is crazy. He's got a toy and he is just throwing it around. Okay, I'm gonna try to hold the tripod still. So I probably should do some experimenting and figuring out, the best type of bind off, especially for ribbing in the round. Wally. Okay. But for a Christmas gift, I did not really have time since I had a deadline. I should do it when I don't have a deadline for something. So yeah. That is that one. I'm going to pause this video and go try to adjust the lighting a little bit and try to see if I can get Wally to settle down, and then I'll come back and talk about the second item. So the second thing that I finished as a gift, if you have watched the podcast, then you have seen kind of the process of working on this project. This is that cowl that I started. So if you have not watched the podcast, or if you just need a quick refresher, this is some of my hand spun that I basically over twisted when I was plying it and completely killed it. Made merino not soft at all. And I loved the colors, and so I still wanted to use the yarn, and so I started it as a cowl. The Long and Winding Row by Susan Ashcroft is the pattern. Sorry, I'm trying to keep Wally occupied over here. So the Long and Winding Row, and the colors look great, and I really liked the way it was looking, and you can't see this on the video, it feels terrible. It is coarse and stiff and just not something that you're going to want to wear around your neck as a cowl. So through sharing that with you guys and kind of thinking about some options, especially because I really do like the colors and how it looks, I didn't want to I didn't want to throw away the yarn. I wanted to use it. So one of the suggestions was to make it into a basket. And so that is what I have done. So basically I used all of the yarn and I knit the cowl, and it's twice the height that you see here. So I knit the cowl. Let's just call it a circle. I knit in the round. And then I folded it over. So that way the inside, which since I didn't set up my lights, you're not gonna get to see it quite as well. But the inside basically looks, it's still the right side of the fabric. It still looks really nice, both inside and out on this basket. So I did that. And then I basically took the two edges and found some, since I used up all this yarn, I didn't have any left, I found some leftover yarn that it was in the color that is the kind of maroonish color in here, and used that just to kind of like baste the edges together. So that way they would stay in place while I was putting the bottom on. So here is the bottom of the basket. You can probably see the fabric a lot better there, because here you're gonna have, yeah, it just looks like a black hole. So yeah, so there's what the fabric looks like, and it does show up on the other side. You can kind of see it depending on, yeah, you probably can't. Anyway, so what I did for putting this bottom together, I got some of that plastic canvas. So basically it's plastic that has the kind of the grid holes in it. And I cut out 2 circles. I measured the bottom and cut out 2 circles, so that way I would have a double thickness of that plastic canvas. And then I had some quilt batting, so I also cut a circle of the quilt batting just and I put the quilt batting part on the top, or on the inside of the basket, so that way the bottom inside of the basket would be a little padded. I didn't do it on both sides. And then I got some fabric, and this was actually in my fabric stash, which I have since pared down a bit. Somebody got a bunch of my fabric. Anyway, so I went through my fabric stash. I thought this matched the kind of reddish maroonish color in here. It has pretty flowers on it. I thought my mother-in-law, because this is a gift from my mother-in-law, I thought this is a fabric that she would like. So I was happy to find that. And I basically, cut 2 circles a little bigger than I needed, put the wrong sides together, and sewed a little over, and I just hand sewed because I didn't feel like getting my sewing machine out for this little bit. So I sewed a little over halfway around the circle, and then I flipped it out, and so that the right sides were showing, and I inserted, the plastic canvas and the quilt batting, inserted it into the circle, and then folded the edges over. If you don't sew, or maybe if you do, one of the things you can do is make little cuts into the edges of the fabric. So these are the edges that are kind of the extra fabric, so that way it will fold over in for the curved edge a little bit more nicely, and it won't bunch up. So I did that, and folded over the edges, and did a what do you call it? Kind of the overhand stitch type of thing to close it up. And then I had my bottom that I had to attach it. So I thought for a while about whether I should use thread to attach it or if I should use yarn. And I finally decided I wanted to use yarn because I was worried the thread might not be as secure. So there are sections where you can definitely see, where I basically just sewed it together. The nice thing about using the plastic canvas, because it has those holes in it, I was easily able to insert my needle. I had been worried, like if I had used cardboard or like a thin piece of wood or something like that to make the bottom, I was worried about being able to actually fasten it. So the plastic canvas allowed me to easily pass my needle through the bottom. And then I just did again kind of an overhand stitch. I think that's what it's called. And just fastened it on, and I thought, I would kind of make it look like it was part of that, like it was a decorative aspect of the basket. So that is what I have. I turned this yarn that I kind of killed a little bit, the beautiful merino fiber that became a really stiff, not so great yarn, but not so great yarn to wear around your neck. Fantastic yarn to make a basket. So thank you guys for helping me kind of work through this project and come up with some ideas for what I could do to kind of save this yarn and still get it done, still make something beautiful out of it. And I gotta say, I love this. I think this turned out really, really, really well. I am super happy with it, and I cannot wait to give it to my mother-in-law. So yeah, that is what I have finished, the last 2 gifts. With gift knids out of the way, I've been able to go back to some projects that have that got put on hold while I was working on gifts. So the first one is my Let Go cardigan, designed by Joji Locatelli. So I think I had done the putting it together and all the 3 separate pieces, putting them all together. So now I'm knitting as one piece. I think I had just done that the last time I showed you guys this. So I haven't made a whole lot of progress since then, maybe another inch or so, but it has moved up to my active patterns again, or my active projects again. So there's the back, so you can see all the cables. And so I'm having fun with that, and basically now it's just kind of knitting the body of the cardigan, and it increases out every, I think it's 6 rows, because it's kind of a swingy cardigan at the bottom, and then obviously I've got sleeves and the whatever the collar and the sides and whatnot. I believe there's that as well. So it's still quite a bit of progress to do on it, but I am finally making a progress. So that is good. Speaking of making progress, I've been working on a long dormant project. I think according to Ravelry, I started this in the summer. So this is the Beauty and the Beast shawl. Sorry, my needles are in their little case. I should take it out so I can spread this out. Okay. So this is my Beauty and the Beast shawl, and I think I had been like up to here for a long time, and I just wasn't really feeling this project, and so I put it away in hibernation, and part of me thought maybe I should rip it out and use the yarn for something else. This is one of my new bases, Legend, which is a blend of merino, yak, and nylon, so it's really cool, and this is the undyed version, so the natural version of it. But I just wasn't feeling the project, and so I think it was actually yesterday morning. I was drinking my coffee, and it was time for knitting, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna pick this up and knit a little bit more on it and see if it's something that I want to continue or if I do want to rip it out. And you know what, suddenly this project seemed exciting again. And I really decided I wanted to work on it. So yesterday morning I did 2 repeats, and each repeat is 12 rows. So yesterday I did 2 repeats, and this morning I did 1 repeat. So I've added a good chunk. So I guess 2. So about there. So right here to up to here. I've added a good chunk just since yesterday. And perhaps it's because now it's getting wider, and so it feels less like a scarf, because I really don't like doing scarves. They just seem to get a little dull after a while. So maybe just having this get wider and wider is starting to be more exciting. I'm not really sure. Whatever it is, now this project is exciting me. I am enthusiastic about it, and it is something that I definitely right now feel like is going to continue. So hopefully that enthusiasm will stick with me, and I will keep working on that. Then I have sock on the needles. So this is Mustache in the Pumpkin Spice Latte colorway, and this is the second sock. So I finished the first one a while back. I am 3 rows away from starting the heel. So I actually wrote down in my Ravelry page how far I got on the color before I started the heel, and I wrote down that I did 3 rounds of this brown color here before starting the heel, and so that is what I'm doing. I need to do those 3 rounds in that dark brown color, and then I can start the heel. So, and usually once I do the heel, a sock kind of zooms on once I get to the foot. So I just need a little bit of time to sit down and do the heel on that. But speaking of doing heels, I have a sock that I started really recently, and I've already turned the heel and it's zooming along. So this is one of my self-striping colors. This is Eric in a Need, and it is, I think it was actually the second self-striping colorway that I did. Once in Future was the first, and I'm pretty sure this one was the second one. And it has not had a sample sock. So for whatever reason, I have knit samples of every other self-striping colorway, and this one I had not gotten around to knitting the sample sock. So I finally decided it was time to knit this one's sample. And so that's what I've been doing. And it is pink and green. A lot of people do, I think because of the green, they read this as almost a red color, and they usually think of this as a Christmas one. But it is pink and green. Anyway, so I've done the heel and I am over halfway on the foot. So like I said, it kind of seems to zoom along, and I'm using my Houston Fiberfest little needle caddy from Diana Couture. And the needles, do you remember when I showed you that I got those heavy metal needles from Diet Craft? So these here. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're a lot shorter than I usually use for sock needles. Am I going to be able to do a sock on it and feel comfortable? And especially the heel, you know, when I have all the stitches for the heel on one needle. Is the needle long enough, or are they going to fall off? And I have to say, it worked just fine. I really didn't have any problems with the heel. And I am enjoying these needles. And in fact, I forgot, I have it written down on Ravelry, I forgot to look it up, which day I started this, but like I said, I started this not that long ago, and I have already gotten almost completed on the sock. Like I said, I'm halfway on the foot. This has just zoomed off the needles, and I'm wondering if the needles themselves are helping with that. It just seems to be moving more quickly than the socks that I knit on my other needles, which are also Diet Craft, but the Darn Pretty, which is the laminated wood. And I'm wondering, these are heavy metal, so they are pretty sturdy. They don't really have much bend in them, and they feel really solid. And with the Darn Pretties, the wooden versions, those needles feel more fragile. And especially because they are needles, I think I've mentioned before that the place where they got the wood from, the laminated wood, burned to the ground and did not rebuild. And so Diet Craft is not making new needles. They still actually have some stock of that wood, and so they are actually making some from their remaining stock, but it's dwindling. There's not much left. So if something ever happens to that needle, if it breaks, then I cannot replace it. And so I'm wondering if when I'm knitting using those needles, if part of me is being very extra cautious, making sure that I'm not knitting too fast or too tight, or doing anything that's going to potentially damage the needle, because they do feel fragile. And so there is a possibility that I could break one. And I'm wondering if that is actually slowing my knitting down, because these needles do not feel fragile at all, and so it seems to be going faster. So I don't know. I guess I will see the next sock that I put on the needle, see if that one goes pretty quickly too, and if so, I might move over to using those needles more often, just to be able to get some socks done, because got quite a bit of self-striping stash that I need to work through, plus sample socks for my own. So if the needles themselves are going to help me knit faster, then I will definitely be happy to use those. And looking around, that is what I currently have on my needles. I mentioned in the last episode that I felt like I need to dye more self-striping, new colorways this year, especially colorways that are going to be added to the regular lineup. And one of you confirmed that indeed Archimedes was the only regular self-striping that I released this year, 2017. So definitely going to be changing that in 2018. My goal is to release 12 new self-striping colorways in 2018, roughly one a month. We'll kind of see. I might not stick specifically to that schedule, but that's kind of the idea with the number 12. And so what I'm going to be doing is sitting down and planning out all the colorways in advance, and then just working on actually dyeing them and knitting up the samples over the course of the year. So one of the things I'm going to be doing in the next 2 weeks is sitting down with all my I have little mini skeins that are samples of lots of different colors. So I mix and match them all around and play around with color combinations. So that is something I'm going to do, plan out the new self-striping, and then get to work on those. Then the other thing that I'm doing, making sure I'm get everything on my list, is I finally made a decision on the Gawain and Guinevere bases. I've mentioned before that they just aren't really very big sellers. And this kind of goes back to I haven't put as much work into them as some of the other colors. So they haven't been very good sellers, and therefore I don't focus on them very much. I don't dye as much of those bases, and so therefore they don't sell very well since there's not much to choose from. But even when I had more skeins dyed of those bases, they didn't sell very well. In fact, a couple of the skeins of Guinevere that I still have are from very early batches. So probably, I've had them for 2 years at least, maybe it's just 2 years. But they've been around for a while and they haven't sold. I think some of those colors I may do some over dyeing on just to make them a little something new. Anyway, so I have made the decision to officially discontinue those, which I hate to do. I think part of it, I do like each base, and I do think that each base serves a purpose. Guinevere is really awesome for lacy stitch patterns because the 2-ply makes the lace really pop, and Gawain is really great for textured patterns because the tight twist on the 3-ply really pops out the texture. Excuse me. So I do think that there are good reasons for each base, but that doesn't seem to be carrying over into sales. And honestly, putting my inventory, both space and money, into those bases when other bases, I could be using the space and the money for other bases, I kind of need to do that. And part of the reason why I was keeping them around also is the names. It's Gawain and Guinevere. Those are some big names. And it feels awful to be getting rid of them. But just looking at it from a business point of view, that's where those bases are. So with Gawain, I had 4 skeins that were undyed remaining, but I posted about this to my newsletter that went out on Tuesday, and I already had someone claim those 4 skeins. They're actually cooling right now, and I will be rinsing them and putting them on the drying rack in a little later today. So that means no more undyed Gawain. So what I have listed on the website right now, that is it for Gawain. If you are interested in that base, then pick one of the colors that are there and make sure to get it. I did put it on sale, so it is discounted right now just to clear out the remainder of that base. For Guinevere, I have 9 undyed skeins of Guinevere. So if you have a particular color that is not currently available, I think I have 9 dyed skeins and 9 undyed skeins. So if there's a color that you want that is not listed, and you want to claim one of those or multiple of those 9 undyed skeins, let me know and I will dye it for you. Otherwise, just whenever I have a chance, I will dye up those 9 skeins and Guinevere will be done. And I've also discounted Guinevere on the website. So again, it's sad to see them go, but I do have new bases that I am more excited about and that you guys seem more excited about. So I'm going to focus on the ones that are that people are enthusiastic about and that I'm enthusiastic about. So the other thing that I mentioned that I'm doing is having samples made using my yarn, but other designers' patterns. So I found a distributor that I'm able to order print patterns from these designers, and the print pattern also includes a coupon code to get the PDF on Ravelry. So that's what I do with my own patterns. And when I sell the print copies, I have the little coupon code that you enter into Ravelry and get the PDF free. So I found a distributor that does that with some of the designers that they distribute. So and some really, really great designers and designs. So I went through that list and picked out the samples that I wanted to have done. I got a lot of people who, I say volunteered to be sample knitters, but I am paying them. So I guess they volunteered to be considered for sample knitters, and then I went through the list, looked at the patterns that I for sure wanted to make sure to get done in this first round, and picked sample knitters, and all of those people have been contacted. And then everybody that up to that point, I guess it was at the end of last week, who had signed up, who was not selected this round, I just let them know, because I always hate when I sign up for something and you never hear back. You assume that means that you haven't been picked, but you don't know. So I hate to do that to somebody. So I've emailed everyone saying this is not a rejection. It just means that right now I have more people who want to be sample knitters and crocheters than I have samples to be made. So I will be able to go back to that list each time I need a sample made and pick someone else. Anyway, so I think there are 10. It's either 10 or 11 samples that are being made right now. I think if it is 10, then it's 3 crochet and 7 knit. Or it could be 3 crochet and 8 knit. It's one of those two. So I'm currently working on dyeing the yarn for those and getting the yarn out to the sample knitters so I can get the samples for DFW Fiberfest, which is in April. So speaking of samples, I also made the decision that all of the samples in my booth are going to be out of Round Table yarns. So if it is a sample that is made out of a different yarn, one of my designs, then I won't be displaying it in my booth. I will still bring all my patterns and sell them, but the sample will not be on display if it is not out of my yarn. So I went through all of my samples, and I decided that instead of having them sit in my closet unused, there were a few that I kept for myself, but it's the ones that I don't feel like I need to keep for myself. Instead of having them sit in my closet unused, I thought I would try seeing if any of you guys would be interested in buying them. So I'm selling some of the samples, and those are currently listed on my website already. And I had 2 of them sell this morning, so I need to package those up and send them out, so thank you for that. So I'm not going to show you all of them, I'm just going to show you a few. If you love yellow, have I got the samples for you. This is my Lionette and Lioness hat and cowl. Nice little cables on there, in Malabrigo merino worsted, so super, super soft and very, very bright. So if you have winter doldrums, these will definitely take care of that. And then I have, this is my Dorigen cowl, and this is actually out of one of my yarns, but it is a base that I discontinued quite a while back. This was my Galahad base, which is a non-superwash merino. And so since it's out of a discontinued base, I really can't use that anymore. So that is something that is available. Then I also have a colorway that I discontinued. This was one of my variegated colors back when I thought maybe I would be doing more variegated. And since I don't offer this color anymore, I don't need this hat sample. And there's also a matching cowl. So, and then I've got some other things in there and that are posted on the website. And if you have a Doctor Who fan, I have my original Don't Blink Illusion scarf out of Cascade 220. So those are available on the website right now. If you are interested in possibly getting one of those samples, you can get the details and the price of each one online. So let me look at my list. Samples, goodbye to Gawain and Guinevere, self-striping. That is what I have on my list for dyeing. So lots of things to look forward to in the new year for Roundtable Yarns. So I think that I would definitely be remiss if I did not mention the Doctor Who Christmas special. So yes, I watched the Doctor Who Christmas special. I actually watched it on Christmas night when it was airing. So I have not made a secret of the fact that Peter Capaldi is not my favorite Doctor. But since Clara got left behind, and when Bill was added, I actually liked the dynamics between them better, and I liked Peter Capaldi a lot better. And I think it was mostly I did not like Clara. Anyway, so I'll say that the saying goodbye to this Doctor was not as emotional as it was for some of the previous Doctors for me. I know there are other people who this is their favorite Doctor, and so that was a big deal. Anyway, all in all, I think the episode was fun in many ways. It was really interesting to see the Peter Capaldi's Doctor interact with the was meant to be the first Doctor, and kind of see that interaction. And then one of the writers that is actually I think stepping back from writing, he was actually one of the actors, one of the characters in this one, so he got to kind of step in front of the camera. And there was a little moment with Clara, but it was okay. It did not, even though I don't like Clara, it was actually kind of a good closure for that part of the story. I'm trying not to give spoilers in case you haven't seen it, so maybe that was a spoiler, just the fact that Clara pops up, so I apologize. I probably should have mentioned that. So non-spoilers. Yeah. So all in all, I think it was a good episode. Again, not one of my favorites because it's not my favorite Doctor. And then at the end, this can't be a spoiler if you are a Doctor Who fan. Since we're saying goodbye to Peter Capaldi, so we get the whole regeneration scene and we get to see the new Doctor. And obviously, and again, unless you just haven't been paying attention, we already know who the new Doctor is, and we know that the new Doctor is female this time. Hi, Wally. So Doctor Who going to oh my gosh, her name was in my head and then it just slipped out. Sorry about that. She was on Broadchurch. Yeah. I don't know why my mind just went blank. Anyway, so we do get to see the very first moments of her in the role of the Doctor. So it will be really exciting, I think, to see how that turns out and and what the new Doctor, the personality and the dynamics that go into the Doctor. So anyway, so I enjoyed the Christmas special. Again, not my favorite thing ever, but I wasn't expecting it to be. I think it was a good send-off for Peter Capaldi, and definitely a good setup. Yeah, again, don't want to do spoiler. I guess a very good cliffhanger for the new Doctor, for sure. So, the other thing I mentioned last time, a series of books that I started reading by Maggie Stiefvater, something like that, The Raven Boys, and there are 4 books. I am on the 4th book, near the end. According to my Kindle, I have just over an hour worth of reading time left to go on the book, so that's probably what I will be doing this evening, finishing that book. It has taken a few turns that, excuse me, it's taken a few turns that maybe that I'm not unhappy about, but maybe if I had chosen, certain paths, maybe I wouldn't have gone in that direction. But it is still definitely something that I am enjoying, and I am looking forward to seeing how it turns out and how everything gets wrapped up. I do have the next book that I want to read kind of lined up and queued up, so that way I don't have to kind of wait around while I'm trying to make a choice about what I want to read next. I do still need to sit down and go through my queue of books and kind of prioritize them and say, okay, these are the next few books that I want to try, so that way if I do end up with a book that I don't like so much, I can give up on it because I don't have to worry about making that next book decision. Let's see, that's what I'm reading. Sorry, I have a list of things that I want to make sure to talk about. The other thing is that I had been listening to a lot of podcasts. So as I'm rescanning yarn, as I'm dyeing, as I'm folding laundry, just I have talk, podcast after podcast. A lot of them are political podcasts. Some of them are historical podcasts. And some of them are business podcasts. And I realized that I've just listening to all the talk and concentrating on it and kind of making sure that that I'm getting all the points. It's been kind of exhausting, to be honest. It hasn't really been very relaxing, and I've realized that some of my moods lately have been a little down, and I think some of it is just because I feel a bit bogged down by all the information that I'm getting. And so I'm still listening to some podcasts, but I'm not listening to as many. In just the past 2 weeks, I haven't been listening to as many. Instead, I've been playing music. I have been playing a lot of 80s music. I am definitely a child of the 80s, and that is where, especially my junior high and high school, well, high school was early 90s as well. But that was where a lot of my formative music tastes were. So that music is comforting and familiar to me. I also have been listening to a lot of Lorena McKennett and Heather Dale, who are both musicians who do a lot with kind of myths and legends and stories. Heather Dale especially does a lot of King Arthur stuff. And so that's kind of been what I've been listening to. And my mood has been a lot better. I'm still listening to the podcasts that I enjoy the most, but I'm not, just trying to find any podcast to basically fill up the sound and the time where I'm doing other things. So listening to music has actually gotten me in a better mood. And so I wanted to mention that because I want to make sure that I remember this, that if I'm feeling kind of down, maybe I have been listening to too many podcasts or too many audiobooks, and I just need to take a break and listen to some music, because that definitely helps elevate the mood. And that is everything on my list for this section. Don't forget the Q4 knit along / crochet along. You have a couple more days, depending on when you are watching this, to finish your shawl, literary themed shawl. So that way you can be entered into the drawing to win that mini skein pack of yarn from Wonderland Yarns. And so here's mine. I will post in the FO thread when I get the FO pictures. So make sure you go over there and post in the FO thread. And it is time to start planning for the Q1 knit along. So we had the nominations and the vote. Let me go back to the Ravelry page. So there were some really great themes that were nominated for our first quarter of 2018 knit along. And for a while there, we were having a 3-way tie. So all of the themes, so there were 5, any shawl designed by a Texas designer and then knit with Texas yarn. So kind of going off of that episode, especially about the We Knit in Texas. Any shawl made for yourself. So the idea is, you've done all this gift knitting at the end of the year. Maybe it's time to take some time for yourself. Knit a shawl that you're going to use. Any shawl that uses more than one colorway, any shawl that uses self-striping yarn, and any shawl that includes a new-to-you stitch technique or construction. So the 3-way tie was between the Texas designer and yarn, the shawl made for yourself, and a new-to-you stitch technique or construction. So, three-way tie. I was like, oh, what do you do if there's a three-way tie? I guess sorry, this bag is getting knocked over. Wally keeps knocking it over. Since this is the samples, I don't want to get cat hair all over them. So hang on just a second while I kind of close that up so Wally can't get in there. So what do we do if there is a tie? And I decided I would just kind of I would take slips of paper and write the theme on each one and draw it. I would drawn it right here as I'm recording the podcast and make that be the choice. But you are on Ravelry polls. You are allowed to change your vote if you desire. So it looks like 2 people did change their votes. One person went from one of the themes that was not a part of the tie, and one person went from one of the themes that was in the tie. And both of those people moved to one of the themes. So we have a clear winner with 2 votes more than the second place finisher. Any shawl made for yourself. So you've done potentially some gift knitting or crocheting, and now it's time to take time for yourself. Sometimes this is referred to as selfish knitting for yourself. I really don't like that because I don't think knitting for yourself is selfish. I think it's perfectly acceptable. So, if you want to use the term selfish knitting, that's fine. Wow, now Wally's like coming down from the top. That's fine, but again, don't think of it as selfish in a negative sense. So any shawl that you want to make for yourself. That is the theme for the first quarter of 2018. So I will get those threads started so you can start thinking about planning. Don't cast on until January 1st, so that way you can be officially in that first quarter time frame. So January, February, March. End of March will be the end of that quarter. So start your shawl January 1st or after. Finish by March 30 days. Have September, April, June, November. So 31 days in March. So March 31st. And knit a shawl for yourself. So I have 2 questions, 2 related sets of questions in the questions for Karen thread. So there's actually a lot that's going into these questions. So I'm going to read both of the questions all the way through, and then I'll go back and start talking about specific questions. So Ida Claire says, could you talk about some different breeds or bases, what they are best suited for, the positives and negatives, etc.? I'm not a spinner, but I think that is why I enjoy your spinning segments so much. Yeah, sorry that there haven't been that many lately. What is your favorite sock base? When you block, do different bases behave differently? I noticed that some of my projects need coaxing to block out, and one recent project relaxed a lot and kind of blocked itself. I enjoy your podcast. Thank you. So that's the first set of questions. And then related to that, Care Bear came in and said, hi, Karen. I too would like to know more about your bases, specifically what happens with the mixture of, say, wool and silk. I, for instance, didn't know that having silk in the base would make it harder to frog the yarn. I found this out when I had to frog back 5 times on one KAL using your base with the silk in it. I also didn't know that knitting with plain alpaca would cause the item to stretch very much. Any info on the bases like that would be appreciated. Also, I have just started knitting socks and usually use wool and nylon blend for sturdiness in the sock. If you used your higher twist plain wool yarn, will that yarn last as long with the use of the yarn with nylon in it? Thanks so much. Okay, so first of all, I could probably spend one entire podcast talking about all the answers to this. Maybe even more, because especially the first question, could you talk about some different breeds or bases, what they're best suited for, and the positive and negatives, etc. Oh my gosh, there's so much. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna tell you a little bit of basics about some things, answer some of the other specific questions, and then I have some resources that I think do an amazing job of answering these questions that I want to refer you to, that I think would be a lot more valuable. So, sorry if you hear Luke in the background. He's moved into his playroom, so you'll probably be hearing him play. Okay, there are 2 books that I think every knitter and crocheter, even though they're called the knitters books, works for crochet too. 2 books every knitter or crocheter should have in their library. You have to have these books. They're both by Clara Parks. The first one is The Knitter's Book of Yarn. And the second one is The Knitter's Book of Wool. And she actually has a book of socks as well. So if you are interested in sock yarn, then I recommend that one also. You have to own these books. All of your questions are answered in these books. So honestly, I could just end the segment here. Get these books, read them. All the answers to your questions are there. I'll give you a few more details. But seriously, get these books. Read them. I need to sit down and reread them because it's been a while since I read them. So those are must-haves. If you want to go more in depth into different breeds of sheep, so specifically wool, I recommend the Fleece and Fiber Sourcebook, co-written by Deborah Robson and Carol Icarius. This one goes through and talks about each specific breed. So I happened to just turn to Blueface Leicester, which is one of my favorites. And you can actually see pictures of the sheep. You can see pictures of the fiber itself, samples of the yarn spun and actually knitted. I think they did weaving as well, so knitted and woven. And it really gets into the nitty-gritty details of specific breeds. A similar book is the Spinner's Book of Fleece. So it does by Beth Smith, and so that does a lot of the same things. Don't be put off by these being books for spinners. There's enough valuable information, even if you are not a spinner yourself, to get out of those. So if you really want to dig into specific breeds, these are the 2 books that I recommend, just as additions. But start with these, get these. You have to have them in your library. Okay, so with that being said, so I'm not going to go into the specific breeds and bases and what they're suited for. I really do think that, like I said, I could talk forever about that. So get those books. I think they do that. But say, what is your favorite sock base? I really like the base that I use for my Merlin, the merino and nylon blend. At first, when I was first looking at the bases, I thought, ooh, it's 25% nylon. That's a lot of nylon content. Is that going to be very soft? And fortunately for this yarn, the yarn itself is soft, and then the nylon helps with wear. So I really do like that base. There are also some dyers use a slightly thicker sock base, and sometimes I like that too. But really, just merino and nylon. I do have, actually, I think it's just BFL, but one of my suppliers has a sock base that is BFL, so the Blueface Leicester and nylon, and I have not tried that myself, but that is something that I'd be interested in trying, because I think the BFL might not be quite as soft as merino, but it would definitely stand up to wear pretty well. So I have not yet tried that. Not really sure why, because I do like BFL, but that is something else that I would consider that could potentially become a favorite if I do actually try it. But I really just like a good merino and nylon blend. So that's a sock base. Let's see, Care Bear had. Okay, so in knitting socks, do you usually use a wool and nylon blend? Yes, so usually use that. So your question is, if you used a higher twist plain wool yarn, will that yarn last as long? Last as long? Possibly not, because the nylon really does help. But with the high twist, then that will help. Hand up. Hang on. Okay, so the merino only, no nylon, with a really tight twist, that will work for socks and it will hold up. But over time, I think if you compare the two, like if you knit one out of the no nylon but high twist and one out of the merino and nylon, most likely I would expect the one without nylon to wear through first. But I actually have not done that experiment. Actually sounds like an interesting experiment. So maybe I'm wrong, but my theory would be that the high twist would hold up well, but maybe not quite as well as the merino with nylon. And that is one of the reasons why I picked Gawain. So I mentioned earlier I'm getting rid of Gawain because the high twist, there are some people who do not like nylon and who want to make socks without nylon. And so if especially if you are that type of person, then you definitely want to get high twist yarn. But probably if I'm really deciding, I would go with the nylon. But I don't think that I don't think it would be bad to knit socks out of high twist without nylon. So I think those are the sock questions, and I think that leaves the blocking types of questions. So when you block, do different bases behave differently? And I declare you said that that's Diana, right? I should have looked to see who you were. You've mentioned that you've noticed that things block differently. So so the answer is definitely yes. And I'll go into the detail in just a second on that. And then Care Bear, her blocking question said that plain alpaca would cause it to stretch. She didn't know that it would cause the item to stretch very much. Then I need to remember the wool and silk blend. Okay, so blocking. Okay, when you block items, basically you don't have to stretch. Blocking is really just washing, but especially in shawls, usually kind of stretch and pin things out. But usually blocking involves wetting your item in some way, whether that be actually immersion wetting or doing like a steam or spraying or something like that. But it basically you're adding moisture to the wool, or whatever your fiber content is. And whenever you do that, that kind of relaxes the fibers and causes it to to move a little more easily. And in some cases, some of those fibers move a lot more easily than others. So there's a whole big section in the Knitter's Book of Yarn that actually talks about the anatomy of yarn. So I actually, again, recommend this book to look into it. But basically with wool, what you have are, wool has, if you look at it under a microscope, it has little scales. Not scales like reptile scales, just parts of it. I mean, if you look at your own hair, we actually don't really have scales. Our hair is very smooth if you look at it under a microscope, but wool has, so they're called scales. So little parts of it that when they are agitated or wet or kind of moved around, they start sticking up. And whenever those scales start sticking up, they kind of, if there are some other scales that are nearby, they will start to interlock with each other. Hang on just a second. Okay, so when the scales are wet, and especially if there's some agitation involved, they pop up basically, and if there are other scales nearby, they will come along and interlock, and that is what felting is. Basically, all those scales are interlocking and becoming where they can't move anymore. So that's kind of the chemistry or setup behind felting. This is a very, very basic description. So what the superwash process does is it basically is smoothing those scales down so they don't pop up. Depending on the process, I think I probably shouldn't say that because I'm not sure. But basically it's smoothing those scales. So that way when the fiber is wet and it's moving back and forth, the scales are not there to interlock. They move, just slide basically against one another. So if you notice, even just with merino, if you have superwash versus non-superwash merino, your superwash, because those scales are smoothed down, is going to stretch out a bit more because basically the fibers are allowed to move past each other more easily, whereas the non-superwash still have those scales that will grab onto each other and start interlocking. So you might notice if you've worked with superwash, which now all of my yarn that I dye is superwash, that it does have a tendency to grow a little bit when you're blocking. So always account for that when you are making your projects. But then there are other fibers that will grow even more. So alpaca. So if you look at alpaca fiber under a microscope, you'll notice it does not. It technically does have scales, but they are like not like wool. They are much larger and much further apart. So that gives alpaca a lot more room to spread, the fibers to spread apart. And I should have grabbed some fiber and actually shown you kind of how fiber works. But anyway, so it allows the individual, fibers to stretch away from each other. They don't have anything to grab onto. So that is one reason why alpaca just kind of keeps going and going and going, because there's nothing to grab onto. Silk is very smooth, very, very, very smooth. And so that is one reason why silk content is going to, in your yarn, is going to make things grow. Because again, they're just sliding right past each other and not having anything to grab on. So that can definitely affect things. As far as specific individual breeds of wool, again, if you get the one of these fleece books, you can see that basically fleece has different staple lengths. Basically the length of, and this is where actually having some fiber right here to show you. So here we go. So different staple lengths. So one section of the fiber, how long it is. So some wool is shorter and some wool is longer. So merino has a really short staple length, and something like blue-faced Leicester is a little longer. And then there's a related wool to the blue-faced Leicester called the long wool Leicester. Just in the name, long wool, the staple length on that guy is really long. So that can also affect kind of how the yarn interacts with the blocking, and also just with knitting. That also has somewhat of an effect to softness. There are other aspects and characteristics that play into softness. But all of that, I think, even if you're not a spinner, looking at those characteristics of the different breeds can really help you see why the yarn kind of turns out the way that it does. So that's why, even if you're not a spinner, I still recommend the Spinner's Book of Fleece, because I think it gives you some good characteristics. So anyway, like I said, I could spend a lot more time talking about that. One more question I wanted to make sure Care Bear asked about wool and silk. So she said that I didn't know that having silk in the base would make it harder to frog. So really, honestly, with that one, I'm assuming you're talking about Avalon with the 50/50 merino silk. Honestly, it's not the silk that's truly the issue with that base, it's the merino. Because, so going back to this staple length thing, well, it is the combination, but really it's the merino that's kind of causing, I'm assuming it starts to look a little fuzzier, not quite as smooth. Okay, so the silk itself is very, very smooth, and merino is a short staple length fiber. 2 to 4 inches, I believe. I should probably have looked that up, but I think that's about the staple length. So that means there are lots of ends. So, if you've got staple length, you have to add twist. That's how you make yarn, so that those lengths of the fiber basically stay together. So since merino has a really short staple, that means you have to basically have more twist to keep all those ends together so they don't come apart. But since silk, the staple length of silk, so long, because if you look at a silk cocoon, it's basically just like one big long strand. So when you add something that is that very, very long, very, very smooth type of fiber to something that is shorter and therefore has a lot more ends, when you start basically having some wear on that yarn, those two together, they're not going to stay together as well. And so the ends of the merino, since it's got that short staple, are going to start to kind of poke out a little bit. And you're going to notice them. And that's what's kind of creating the fuzzier effect. The same goes for cashmere. Cashmere is a very short staple length. And so you would notice with merino, cashmere, and nylon with this, sometimes the yarn starts to look a little fuzzy, and it's because that cashmere, the ends, the fiber itself is shorter, and the ends, once they start getting kind of touched and fondled, start to poke out. They're not, as into the twist as much, and that's why you start seeing little fuzzies sometimes with that. So really, it's not the silk that's causing the wear and tear as you knit and frog and knit and frog. It's that the long, smooth silk combined with the short staple length of the merino. So it's a lot of information, and like I said, a lot more that I could say about that. And that is something that I am enthusiastic about. I really enjoy talking about and thinking about the different breeds and the different types of fiber and how it interacts. But like I said, I could do an entire podcast episode, multiple podcast episodes just on that. So I'm going to go back to get these two books. If nothing else, get these two books by Clara Parks. Read them, or just use them. You don't have to read them cover to cover, but definitely, use them as reference books. And this really, really will help answer a lot of your questions. So I highly recommend those books, and I personally feel like I should go back through them and kind of remind myself of some of the details, because it has been a while since I have read those books. So thank you very much for your questions. Luke is definitely getting very active, and I don't know how much you've been hearing, especially in these last few segments with him in the background. I had to, the segment, the questions for Karen, I had to cut off a few times because Luke kept coming in. So I think that's probably my clue that I am done recording for this podcast episode. There was one little segment on a couple of books that I got for Christmas, but I will... maybe I'll mention those next time. Anyway, so thank you very much for watching the podcast. Luke is super enthusiastic today about playing, and I'm interested to hear what you're enthusiastic about. What is going on in your life, especially knitting life, that you are excited about and maybe looking forward to in the new year. And come over to the Ravelry group, the discussion forum for this particular episode, for episode 45, and tell me about it. Tell me what you're enthusiastic about right now. Definitely want to hear it. And then any other comments that you have on the episode, come share them there. Make sure you are posting your Q4 project if you finish one before the end of the year, and then start thinking about your first quarter 2018 project, something that you're making for yourself, a shawl that you're making for yourself. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with there. And thanks for watching. I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Until then, happy knitting.